When JP Morgan lost at least $2 billion, but now reports are saying maybe at least $7 billion when they made risky derivatives trades, Elizabeth Warren and then later Senator Bernie Sanders and Senator Barbara Boxer and others asked that Jamie Dimon no longer sit on the board of the New York Fed. Now, they're not just asking anymore. Senator Sanders and Senator Boxer have introduced legislation in Congress saying that it is a conflict of interest for JP Morgan Chase CEO to sit on the board of the New York Federal Reserve, since the New York Federal Reserve oftentimes gives unlimited money to JP Morgan. Now, would that be a conflict of interest? Well, if you don't think that's a conflict of interest, you misunderstand the term. Of course it's a conflict of interest. In fact, I love Senator Sanders' line on this. He says, quote, "How do you sit on a board which approves $390 billion of low-interest loans to yourself? Who in America thinks that makes sense?" Well, Senator Sanders, I do have an answer for that. Jamie Dimon thinks it makes sense. Oh, should I give myself a $390 billion loan? Well, I shall indeed. And by the way, if you don't know how the Fed is structured, everybody on the board is bankers. And they're the ones who get the money from the Fed. It's one giant joke on us. We've set up the Fed so that it has the power to print money, which is the most important power there is in the country in a sense. And then we let the bankers sit on the board to decide who gets that money. And shockingly enough, they often decide they should get that money at almost no interest loans. So they could take it out, basically free money. They could lend it out to you, maybe at 4%, going back to the Treasury, maybe at much greater rates for businesses. And then go, oh, well, you look at that. I guess we get to keep the difference. Huh. Is it a conflict of interest? Only the most glaring one in the country. Will anything be done about it? Absolutely not. This piece of legislation has the least likelihood of passing of any legislation. Because if you question why Jamie Dimon's on the New York board, then you question why everybody on that board is bankers that get to print their own money. And we can't have you questioning that. Dave, let me ask you another question. I'm enjoying Dave being part of the show today. Okay, we should mix this up more often. All right, Dave Kohler, Federal Reserve System, makes sense or doesn't make sense? Go.
Well, it's worked for a long time.
Except for the times that it hasn't.
Yeah, I'm glad that you pointed out that just at the end there that, yes, Jamie Dimon's sitting on the board of the Fed, because that's what the Fed is. It's not the Department of Treasury. It's a collection of all the big banks. So it's been this way for 100 years, and people have been objecting to it for 100 years. I really, you're asking me whether it works or not?
No, look, so here's a quick thing, right? If you put a lot of regulations on it, as we did in the 1930s, right? And you say, okay, look, you got to separate this out. A bank can't take deposits and gamble with those deposits, and you can't gamble this much because this is all government and business actually all interwoven, and you're printing money that is in some sense the American people's money, right? It's not the bank's money. So you have to be really, really careful. And Canada, for example, has tremendous regulations on their banks, and they don't collapse. And for us, for 40 years, our banks did not collapse because we had the right regulations. So it's not fair, Dave, to say, hey, it's kind of worked for 100 years, right? It depends on what rules you have. But my more fundamental question is, isn't there something incredibly strange about letting the Fed print money, and then the guys who sit on the board of the Fed are the bankers?
If you're going to have a board that governs the way the financial system works and where the money flows, it in some ways makes sense that bankers are the ones on that board because they know.
No, but it could be like retired bankers. It could be people who don't have a conflict of interest, who aren't going to get the money. It could be analysts. It could be professors. It could be the Sentinel.
The Sentinels, right.
It's an interview we did on TYT Interviews, which, by the way, is massively banked. You should check out TYT Interviews. But you can't, look, Dave, I'm going to cut it off. Okay, thank you. But no, you can't, look, it's like letting me, you, Jesus, and JR print money and then say, okay, you guys get to decide who gets that money. Jesus, who do you think we're going to give the money to? Me.